Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 422, and my guest is Bob Bledsoe. Bob breeds and raises ball pythons and is the founder of Green Room Pythons, educating us on all things python while helping to dispel fears and myths around these gentle and interesting tube socks. He's a musician, comic, and actor, and you've likely seen him in film or on one of your favorite shows like Parks and Rec, Lie to Me, Hannah Montana, Jay Leno. He's been on a ton of stuff. He's a dear friend. I've known him forever, and I'm excited for him to be on the show. As some of you may know, I am a huge fan of snakes. I've always loved them, and I very much enjoy going over to Bob's place and getting to pet and love on these really intriguing, interesting, beautiful creatures. So hopefully, even if you're a little afraid or very afraid of snakes, this episode will, make you a little bit more open-minded toward them. All right, general stuff. Hey Human Podcast is now on YouTube under Official Susan Ruth. If you're getting the show there, please hit that subscribe button. It's really helpful and I appreciate it. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism, TikTok at Susan Ruthism. I am on Instagram at Susan Ruthism, or you can just check out my website, susanruth.com. Or if you want to learn more about my guests and check out all the links that I put for every show, go to heyhumanpodcast.com. And if you are into music, I am on all the music-y kind of places under Susan Ruth, and you can listen to my albums there. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Please hit that subscribe button. It's really helpful. If you have a couple minutes, write a review. Let me know what you think, especially if you think good things. And thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love, and here we go. Bob Bledsoe, welcome to Hey Human.
Hi, Susan. I'm so happy to be here.
Hello, love. It's so good to see you.
It's always good to see you. Anytime I can hang out with you is a great day.
Oh, thanks, honey. We have known each other a long time.
Yeah.
I can't even count how many fingers that is, but it's a lot of them.
It's got to be 60 to 70 years, something like that.
Yeah, we might have to involve toes, for sure. And you have had many lifetimes within a lifetime, which I love that because I'm the same way. We're going to start with the beginning of you. Tell me about your upbringing. Where'd you grow up? What shaped you as a person?
I grew up in Spokane, Washington, with a loving mother and father, supportive, and a sister who was and still is my best friend, favorite person on earth. So that family, that lovely family upbringing, shaped me as a person. Began to shape me as a person.
Did you have aspirations as a young kid to go into the arts?
Yeah. I wanted to be a comedian, or I wanted to be an entertainer of some sort, when I was a kid. I mean, I also had dreams of being a zoologist. I remember that as one of my earliest things. I found out what the word zoologist meant when I was maybe in first grade or something. I was like, yeah, I want to do that. But then it was all I would see Saturday Night Live and I'd be like, oh no, I kind of want to do that.
And how old are you when you started doing stand-up?
I was in my early 20s.
Did that come secondary to acting, or was that first?
No, that was first. I started doing open mics in Seattle. They were going pretty well, and I actually the same week. Now I'm remembering the same week that I did my first open mic, I signed up for an acting class. I kind of started them both at the same time.
What was it like as a stand-up comedian? That's a pretty brutal existence, from what I understand. What was that like for you, and how did that shape your personality?
It is kind of a brutal existence, and in a couple of ways, but it's also great in some others. Looking back on it, starting stand-up in Seattle at that time, in the early 90s, it was just a great place to start. Because when I compare it to people that are trying to start stand-up now in Los Angeles, if they can find a place to get up on stage, they're not going to find a real audience. Their audience is just going to be other comics waiting to hit the stage, and it's really tough to do. And I think that's kind of the case in Seattle right now, maybe. But back then, you could do an open mic, and we had good audiences. You know, people would come and pay and sit down and buy drinks and watch open mics. So it was really great in that respect. There were, you know, I was young, and as much as I actively tried not to be competitive with other comics or whatever, I think I was. I think I didn't like comedians that I thought were maybe funnier than I was, or maybe they did a thing that I felt like I couldn't do, and so I just didn't like that person, you know. So there was some traits in my personality that came out that I didn't like or that I don't like when I look back on that.
How did you make an adjustment for that, or have you not?
No, I have for sure. I'm
just kidding. I know you.
I think it just comes with growing up, you know, and maturing. And when you're in your early 20s, you're not an adult yet. You know, I had to go through that and you know, get a little bit of perspective and understand that we're not there's no competition here, you know, with artists, with stand-up comics. There's no competition. There's nobody that's me, and I'm not going to be them.
Did you know you were funny from a young age too, or was it just that you saw these other actor comedians and you thought, oh, I want to do that, without really understanding what it meant to do that?
I was funny as a kid. I could make my sister and my mom cry laughing, and I was pretty good at being a class clown. I think I thought that was my thing, you know, that I could probably do that.
Did you audition for SNL?
I did, in that I didn't do a live audition, but I sent in a tape of characters. My manager pitched me to them, and they wanted to see a tape, so I put a tape together. And I did audition for Mad TV, and I went through the entire process of the audition, and at the very last one, the screen test, I tested. I did felt like I had a great audition and had a great rapport. My manager called me about an hour after that audition, and he was like, yeah, they decided not to cast a fat funny guy. So they have these categories, and I was in the category of the fat funny guy, and you know, I can't remember who they had at that time, but that was the thing. They were like, yeah, I mean, they liked you, but they decided not to go with your type, basically, for this season. And that was the final season of Mad TV. We didn't know at the time, obviously, but it got canceled mid-season. So it was crushing to go through that process and think that I was probably going to be cast and then not get it. But I think it would have been worse to get it and think, oh my gosh, I'm on Mad TV now, I've made it, and then get 6 episodes in and be canceled.
Were you at this time also starting your family?
Not at that time. That was after. I started my family before I did my first open mic. I had kids at that time. So I had young kids. I was working as a mortgage banker, basically, which is what I did right away. I started working in the mortgage industry because my dad had done it, and I kind of hated it, but I could make money at it. That's what I was doing. And then I started doing open mics. We were in Seattle, and I was like, I think I want to try this. So that was that.
That's great, though, that you had the support to try it, because that's a huge leap of faith to go from such an industry that's not going away, certainly, to an industry where it's feast or famine.
Yeah. Well, I didn't quit my day job for a while. You know, I guess I was in the mortgage industry for a number of years while I was developing my act, and I still would. I started touring. I started going on the road for road gigs when I was still working as a mortgage guy. You know.
Yeah. This morning, I texted you about this earlier, but just this morning was scrolling TikTok and came upon a little blip from Parks and Rec, and there you were on Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I watch different shows and just randomly, and all of a sudden there's Bob. So funny.
It's so funny that clip is on TikTok. That was one of my favorite things. You know, I probably was on set for a total of 2 hours. It was so fast, and I was really disappointed because I'm a fan of that show and was at the time that I shot the thing. What I really liked about that, it's one little scene with Rashida Jones, and the idea is that it's that I'm trying to complain about something about the city, and she is supposed to be a surrogate for the city on that particular day to answer my complaint, and so after I say whatever, she goes, I'm just a nurse. Actually, I don't really work for the city. And then I'm supposed to show her my arm, pull up my sleeve and show her my arm and say, oh, can you take a look at this? And so we did a couple takes of that. And then I asked the director, I said, do you mind if I just, instead of pulling up my sleeve, do you mind if I just whip off my shirt? Because that might be really funny. And he goes, no, let's try it. So we did one take of that, of me taking the shirt all the way off, which is so stupid and ridiculous. And that's what they used, which made me really happy. At that time, I was doing a lot of Jay Leno appearances. I was one of the regular sketch guys on Leno, and it seemed like every time they brought me in is when they needed a fat guy to take off his shirt. So, that was kind of my go-to thing at the time was take off your shirt.
I've seen you. Let's see. I've seen you as in giving a hot dog vendor person. I'm trying to remember which show that was.
That was on that Lie to Me.
Lie to Me, that's right. And it's always so random when I see you. The same goes with my friend Grant. He just shows up at things and I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Funny.
Isn't that fun though? Like to see you're just watching a show and you see your friend pop up. I love that.
It's the best.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It's the best. You have been in a few movies and had that experience. But the thing that really intrigues me about you is a while back, you started to get into snakes, and maybe you've been in snakes your whole life, but you went for it. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I went deep.
What started that adventure?
I've always had reptiles as a kid and have been fascinated in them, in keeping them, but also just learning anything I can about them because they're so different from us. Like what is going on with those things, right? So let me say this. I've been, there's one part of the story, which is that I went from touring comedy clubs to touring Renaissance festivals, right? So I have this show that I do for Renaissance fairs, and that's pretty much what I do. That's my touring now, as I do these festival gigs. When COVID hit, all those gigs were canceled, obviously. And that gave me time to start my YouTube channel, which I've been wanting to do for a long time. And separately, I've also always wanted to breed reptiles. And I had a snake, I had a ball python. And I thought, okay, I paid too much for this ball python anyway. Maybe I just get another one and breed him. And then I can produce babies and sell a couple babies, and that'll recoup my cost. Plus, it'll get me doing something that I've always wanted to do. And I have time at home now to learn how to do that. And then I went, I can make my YouTube channel about that as well, because I know a lot about snakes. I can teach people about snakes, and I can make it funny. So we'll start this channel, and we'll just see how it goes. I'll put up a video every week. And the channel has done well.
It's done really well. And you have 30 snakes now?
I have around 30 right now, but that goes up and down based on snakes that hatch and that sell and whatever. I usually keep one or two snakes out of each clutch that I have, clutch of eggs, and then I sell the others.
For many people listening, they are crawling out of their skin with the idea. I personally love snakes, and
you love snakes, yeah.
I love them, and I have so much fun when I come over to your place and get to cuddle snakes.
Yeah.
And they really have a lot of personality. They're so beautiful. And I think people think, they're slimy and gross, but they're not at all slimy. Right. They have a really cool texture and feel. They're cool to the touch. It's sublime, really.
Yeah.
And their patterning is so gorgeous. Talk a little bit about how you manipulate pattern as a breeder.
Yeah. So these are all I breed pythons. And these are ball pythons. I'm raising up some other species to breed as well, but right now it's ball pythons. And the species of ball python, we have hundreds of morphs that we have identified. These are genes that change the color and pattern of these snakes. So you can have everything from crazy pattern orange and black with some, all kinds of colors, not green. We haven't found green yet, but tons of colors and patterns, all the way to just a plain white snake, like all white. When you learn a little bit about the genetics, you can understand how mixing one male with one female will get the potential for certain gene combinations that do some really cool things.
Yeah, because some of your snakes have smiley faces on them. Mm-hmm. have triangles and squares. Well, I don't think I've seen a square, but just really interesting. And I think it's so funny that in everyone's mind, if you say, think of a snake, for the most part, people think green. And that's it.
Yeah.
A snake is green. And maybe that comes from our childhood when we're chasing garter snakes. And
well, it's also when you see a picture, I think when you see a picture of an emerald tree boa or a green tree python, that bright green is so stunning that it sticks in our mind.
Yeah.
As the color of snakes,
What's a fallacy that you like to dispel for people who don't know a lot about snakes?
Well, the one that I hear almost once a week, and this comes to me because people are either telling me this as a really interesting story or they're warning me that I should be careful and not have pythons. They always make it personal. The story is this. My cousin has a friend who had a python, and the python stopped eating, and she would sleep with it every night. And then she took the snake to the vet to see why it wasn't eating, and the vet told her that it's sizing her up. It stopped eating to empty its belly, and it's sizing her up to eat her. And so they go, so be careful with those pythons that you have. And that is something that no snake would ever do. Snakes don't plan out their meals. For one thing, they're opportunistic feeders. They would never, snuggle up next to a deer to decide if that's going to work or not.
That's why you never ever see a snake at Weight Watchers.
Right,
ever.
Right. That's right. That's the thing. And then also there's only one species of snake that has ever in recorded history eaten a person. And it's not an anaconda, as people might guess. It's a reticulated python.
Reticulated means that their jaws open up?
No.
Or what does it mean?
Pretty much all snakes have jaws that are unhinged already and open up. Reticulated refers to, I don't understand why this is a thing, but reticulated is a word that means netting. And I've never heard it in any other context other than talking about this snake. And the pattern on them looks like a net. They have a really cool pattern. And you have played with two reticulated pythons. They're dwarf, though, so they'll never get as big as the ones who actually can eat a small human in Southeast Asia.
It's hard to pick a favorite of your snakes, but I was partial to that cutie patootie baby tiny one that curled around my wrist.
Oh, was that little Pip? Was that the pygmy python?
Pip.
Yeah.
Pip.
Yeah. Pip is so cute. Smallest python in the world.
They smell through their tongues?
They do have noses and they can smell. But
okay.
They say that
I don't know anything.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, that's another thing that a lot of people believe because we always say that tongue flicking is them smelling with their tongue, but really what it is they can smell normally. Probably not great. They probably don't have a great sense of nose smell. But I don't know, I'm just guessing. But that tongue, what it does is it picks up scent particles in the air. That's why we call it smelling. But what it does is they pull it back in, and there's a hole in the roof of their mouth called a Jacobson's organ that goes directly to their brain. And they hit their tongue with that hit their tongue to the Jacobson's organ, and it tells them everything that's going on in the room. It's their main sense. That's a better sense for them than vision and anything else. So they can tell directionally. A snake could be like on the side of a trail, and they could tongue flick, and they can tell directionally where a rodent is. Not just that there's a rodent in the area somewhere, but they've got those two forks on their tongue, and they can tell they've picked up more scents on one of the forks than the other, so the rodent is off to the right or something.
That's like a water witcher.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's like a water witcher, yeah.
That's really cool. I just noticed that as I was snuggling with your bebés that they would stick their tongue out along my face, and I thought, oh, are they sniffing me?
Yeah,
getting me.
Yeah, and they'll touch your face with it, like they want to figure out what that is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you say that are they very bright? I mean, it seems like they are an instinct driven, but I like to anthropomorphize pretty much everything. They seem to have so much personality individually.
They do. They do have a lot of personality individually. They are instinct driven. However, this fallacy of, we talk about the reptile brain, and when we say the reptile brain, we're talking about the part of the brain in humans that just goes off instinct. Because the idea used to be that reptiles and amphibians only act on instinct. They don't have any feelings. They don't have anything, and it's just not true. They are trainable. I I target train a lot of my snakes. So target training, for those who don't know, is I present a target to them, a colored disc, and that means that food is available. So for like the reticulated pythons and my black-headed pythons and my boa, I do this with. When they see that target, they know food is available. The only time they get fed is when they see that target. So if they don't see the target, they know they're not getting fed. But the idea is that they follow the target, touch it with their nose or tongue, and then they get their meal. So they're trained that way. I have other snakes that I'll let out to roam around the room if they want. And I have them trained. I have one specifically trained not to go in a certain area that she likes to go in, and I don't want her to go there. So I trained her to not go there, and she doesn't.
And you did that all with food? No,
I didn't do that with food. What I did is I opened her enclosure and kept it open, and I let her come out on her own like I always do. And she would always go behind. It was in and behind other enclosures, and she would always try to go there. So as soon as she would start going there, I would pick her up and put her back in her enclosure and leave it open. So I'm not shutting it and saying you can't get out. But then I would just let her come back out and try it again, and I'd pick her up and put her back in her enclosure. I probably did that for a week, and I would do it maybe, 5 or 6, 8 times a day until she would decide to go somewhere else. And after that week of doing that, it just enforced in her brain that when she goes back there, it leads to back in her cage. And she's trying to explore. She doesn't want to go back in her cage. So every time she goes back there, she ends up in her cage again. So it wasn't a negative reinforcement. It was just that's where you end up if you go back there. So I trained her 2.5 years ago, and she still doesn't go behind that rack. She'll poke her head in there and then come back out and go somewhere else. It's pretty interesting.
So interesting. That's what I like to call the Groundhog Day training.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, they are super smart. They're aware of me. They know who I am. They know that I'm different than you. And you've experienced this. If I hand you a snake, they tongue flick on you and they go, "Oh, I'm probably safe, but I'm not super comfortable with this new person. Let me find the guy that I know. Let me find the big monkey that feeds me."
Yes. Yeah. Although they're still pretty interested.
Yes.
I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the ones that I hand you. They're more, the ones that I've handed you for the most part are more interested in hanging out with other people. I have some others that will, if I hand them to you, they're not going to try to run away, but they'll sort of be like, "Oh, let me find this other guy," like a kid does to their mom.
Sure.
Their mom hands the kid off to some stranger, and the kid reaches for their mom really quick.
Well, and you have the benefit of having them from babyhood, so that you can really show them that physical touch is okay.
Yeah, and they trust me. Snakes don't bond. So they never want to hang out with me necessarily. They'd rather just do their own thing. But if given the option, if I'm holding them and then I hand them off to a stranger, they'll go, "Oh, actually, I'd rather be with that guy that I know." And then once I'm holding them, they're going to be like, "Okay, now I'd rather go off on my own." It's like they're never in their cage going, "Wow, I hope that big monkey comes and pulls me out."
I'm realizing right now I might be part snake. I know that when we brought out one of your babies, they actually she was quite large. I think it was a girl, the white one, and I was wearing my overalls, and she crawled around me and then went and hung out underneath inside my overalls, like underneath my butt.
Yeah.
And it surprised me, and I thought that they would be more in the mood to be out and about and seeing what's what. And you said that they're really not aggressive or predatory or anything like that. They really just want to find the least amount of space to get into and hide and chill out. That they
want to be secure.
What do you think you called them? A meat tube.
They are meat tubes. Yeah. And that's how all the other animals these are ball pythons. They come from Africa, and every other animal, whether it's on the ground or flying, see them as meat tubes. And so they just want to get in a nice, safe spot. That's kind of their natural behavior. And so you're talking about Kata, and Kata's one that is not super comfortable being held. So what she did is she was like, let me find this dark space. It was in your overalls, basically. And she's like, let me just crawl down into this dark space where I feel more comfortable.
Yeah, she's so cute. And then she went on to behind the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
You train kids how to be okay with them too, or people in general. That's part of your work, is to help them not be afraid.
Yeah. People more. It's usually adults, because kids don't, unless the parent has worked on making their kid afraid of snakes. Generally, I find that kids aren't afraid. I have run into children who are afraid of animals in general, and snakes would fall under that category. But for the most part, kids are totally fine with snakes. But adults, I have a series on the channel that I call Introducing People to Snakes Who Are Afraid of Snakes, where I bring someone on who is an actor or a comic or someone who I know is going to be good on camera. Like, I don't want to bring some dud on, but they're also genuinely afraid of snakes, and I help them get over their fear, and it's fun.
That's great. Yeah. Talk about the channel a little bit, and also the adventures, where it's taken you. You go now into the jungle, and talk about all that.
Yeah. It's really taken me places that I never thought I would be. Yeah, so the channel, started as, like I said, as a COVID project. We're in the third year right now. It'll be 4 years in December. It grew steadily and kind of became my full-time job. And it started off as me talking about behavior and care and training and socialization of snakes in my room, as well as teaching people how to not fear snakes, which is a sort of separate category, in my little studio here. And then I started traveling, doing little, going out into the desert to find snakes or whatever, or going to somebody else's facility to talk about their animals, or going to a reptile show to talk about that. But then I ended up last year in the Amazon jungle. I went to Suriname to find boas and anacondas in the wild, and specifically emerald tree boas. To move, basically, there's an area on the Quarantine River, which you've got Suriname on one side and Guyana on the other. And in this one little area of the Quarantine River, it's highly trafficked. There are a lot of hunters and trappers that will, if they see a green snake in a tree, they're going to grab it because they know they can make $35 selling it to someone who will put it in the export system and either send it to the US or the UK to become pets. And those snakes often don't survive that trip, and if they do, they're sickly by the time they get there, and they won't survive long, oftentimes, in somebody's cage. What we did, I've been twice now, and on both those trips, we find as many of these snakes as we can in that area. We pull them out of trees and take them deeper into the jungle and re-release them in an area that people don't go as much. I ended up becoming friends with a middleman who buys these snakes from the people who trap them, and then he sells them to the exporters. And so I'll go to him. I've done this twice now, where when I get to Suriname, I go to him and I go, what do you got? And we end up buying all of his snakes that he currently has, and we take them back. So those are snakes that have been wild caught within the last week or two, maybe. We just, it's cheap. It's like between $5 and $35 per snake. And we might end up with, maybe he has between 5 and 10. It's not like a huge amount, We bring those back and re-release them.
Do they have a homing sense where if you get them and put them further into the jungle, will they try and go back to where they were before?
That's a great question, and we don't know. Here's the trick with this. When I relocate a rattlesnake in Southern California, which I do sometimes, there is sort of a general rule that if you take that rattlesnake more than a mile from where you found it, its chances of survival is about 50%. And it's because they know within a mile of that territory, they know where to get their resources. They're living in the desert, so they know where water is, they know where they can get food, they know where they can hide from predators, stuff like that. There was studies done on rattlesnakes. There's never been a study done on snakes in the Amazon jungle or emerald tree boas. But the thought is that first of all, there's food, water, shelter everywhere in the jungle, no matter where you're at. So they're never going to have to look for any resources. If I find them, or my guide, it's usually one of the guides that finds these snakes. If those guides find the snakes in the tree in that area, a hunter or a trapper is definitely going to find them that same night or the next night or whatever. So getting them out of there is the most important thing. My guess is that they kind of stay in the range that we put them in. I doubt that they have a homing sense that brings them back, but we don't know because the study has never been done.
They don't have ears to put a tag on.
Right. Well, you can't. So here's the thing. I've talked to some people about this. You actually can tag them. So you can put a little tracker in them it's a little scanning device that you just implant with a syringe, and when you scan it, you can pull up all the information on that snake, where it was found before, whatever. But you have to catch it again in order to scan it. And in the jungle, it's really tough to do that. You can also put a GPS tracker on a snake, and that's what I would love to do with some snakes.
Like a little collar?
It's actually a thing that's surgically implanted, but then you have to take it out again before it goes dead. So you got to find that snake a year later and take it out. And if the GPS tracking is working, you can find it, But it's pretty invasive, but it would tell us what that behavior is, and I'd love to learn,
Yeah, I know that tracking is important with creatures, but I would think that just to stop poachers, just throw a little neon spray paint on them or something.
Well, also, by the way, I should be clear because I was saying that it's a highly trafficked area. These aren't poachers, and it is legal, and it is a way of life for people in Suriname. And these hunters are legally, they can just go out and catch whatever they want. The majority of the money they make is on birds. So they're going and taking baby parrots and macaws out of trees and putting those on the market. They get the most money for those, but on their trip, they go out for like a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time. If they see a green snake, they're going to snag it too. But also, people that are going to work that work in the mines, they'll go downriver, and on their trip in, they're looking for snakes too. And they'll grab whatever snakes they can, put them in a bag, and then they go work in the mines for 2 weeks, and that snake sits in a bag for 2 weeks. And then they take it back and sell it, and they make extra cash. So it's legal to do, and they're not depleting the Amazon of these emerald tree boas. There's a lot of them. It's not like I'm saving the world. What I'm doing is saving a handful of snakes, individual snakes, that would have otherwise maybe died in the process of being captured. And
these snakes get quite large. How in the world do you get one out? I've seen videos of, they're huge. How do you get them out of the tree?
Well, the emeralds are not that big. I mean, you could get an emerald that's 6 feet long, but really the thickness.
That seems big.
Yeah, it seems big, but it's really not. Like when you stretch it out, it's 6 feet, but you're never going to see it stretched out, and it doesn't seem like that. Like I can easily hold it in one hand. They're not that big, but the way we get them out of the trees is we have we actually have a series of 3 or 4 of these long wooden poles with a fork at the end. And when we see an emerald up in a tree, we just put the fork, get the snake in the fork basically, and then twist it like spaghetti and bring the snake down. Works really well. So we can do that with emerald tree boas, and we do it with Amazon tree boas, which are a different species and they're much smaller, but those also get caught sometimes.
Now, are you working at all toward getting a show like on National Geographic or anything to do this?
I'm not right now. I would love to. It would be fun, but there are a lot of people that are, when you get into like the reptile YouTube world, there's a number of people that are really good that could have their own TV show. I could potentially, but like my channel, the way my channel is set up right now, it's definitely a YouTube channel. I do some silly, funny things on it, but it's for sure a YouTube channel. I think if I were to pitch a TV show, I would have to come up with a completely different concept. Yeah. It still would be teaching people about snakes and maybe finding them in the wild, or reptiles in general. Could be, we could do anything. But I don't have anything that I'm pitching right now.
And they all eat different things, mice or rats, or I think you said crickets sometimes.
No,
do not bugs too, or just
not bugs.
That must just be the lizards I'm thinking of.
Yeah, lizards eat bugs oftentimes, depending on the species. The snakes right now, with the snakes that I have, I feed frozen thawed. I don't feed live, but I have a dedicated freezer that has mice, rats, chicks, and quail, and reptilinks, which are basically sausages that are made for reptiles. And I have a couple of species that naturally in the wild eat other snakes and lizards. So I have reptilinks that are made of iguana meat, or whole prey iguana. So it's like the whole thing, guts and bones and everything mixed up in a little sausage.
Jimmy Dean, eat your heart out.
Yeah. The snake that you like, Pip, the little tiny one.
Yeah.
It's little micro links, which are 1 gram each, and she gets those.
She's so freaking cute.
Yeah, she's pretty cute.
Yeah. How do you get them to get amorous with each other? Turn the lights down, put on a little Barry White. What are you doing?
Yeah, you don't have to do much with the species that I breed. Every species is different, and some of them you have to cycle their food. You've got to cycle their temperatures, all kinds of crazy stuff. With ball pythons, you take a male out of his cage and you put it in the female's cage for about 3 days. And within 3 days, they will eventually lock up. Sometimes they do it right away. And they basically lock tails, and then they stay perfectly still for up to 3 days. I mean, it's usually not that long, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's 12 hours, whatever. And sometimes within 3 days, they'll lock and unlock a couple times, But I do that during breeding season. I do that once every month, every 4 to 6 weeks. I'll put the male in with the female for 3 days, and eventually she'll lay some eggs for us.
And some versions of snakes, some breeds live breed, or do they all egg only?
No. There are a lot of species that do live birth. I have one boa in my group, and boas are live bearing snake.
Yeah.
Pythons lay eggs. Boas are live, and then there are other different snakes. Garter snakes are live. Most others lay eggs.
Are they protective of those eggs once they've laid them to let you get in there and snack them away, or?
They're very protective of their eggs, and if you so normally what happens is the female lays eggs, and then I go in and take the eggs and put them into an incubator, because that's first of all, it's a good way to keep the humidity and temperature correct for those babies. But also, I can, as soon as the mother's not on eggs anymore, she can get back to eating. Otherwise, she'll sit on those eggs for 2 months, and she already hasn't eaten for 2 to 3 months while she's building those eggs, and now she won't eat for another 2 months if I have her sit on them. And I have done that before. I've had female maternally incubate before, and it's really interesting and cool. It just she's not going to eat for a while,
How do they go so long without food?
Oh, they can go a year without food. They can go a very long time. A big snake can go a really long time without eating. And sometimes they just decide that they're going to take a break from food for a couple months,
I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
You still have me at their tails intertwine and then they don't move for 3 days.
Yeah.
I would wake up with that snake.
I know. It's crazy. And here's the other thing. Males have 2 penises.
Say what?
Yep. It's crazy. They're called hemipenes, and there's 2 of them. During coitus, they choose to use one or the other.
Huh.
So.
Well, I wonder what makes the choice for them.
I think my guess is that it has to do with which side is going to produce more sperm, and it probably makes it so that in the wild they can breed with multiple females back to back.
Yes, hussies.
If you got 2 sets, you use one up and then you're done for a while on that one, but you got another one ready to go.
Sounds like an insult, but I guess that's a compliment. You hemipenis.
Yeah, right.
Actually, there have been humans born with 2 penis. I've seen that. Now, don't Google it unless you're really ready for it.
But you've spent some time Googling it, so you.
I did because I was curious. You know me; I'll look anything up.
Yeah.
Well, not anything, but most things.
Yeah. Well, let's when we're done with this, let's make a list of things that we can look up.
Okay, good.
Great idea.
You still haven't mentioned the name of your YouTube, by the way.
Green Room Pythons is the YouTube channel.
With the coolest logo, because you're also a musician and you teach music. You're also a member of Mensa. You're like a well-rounded dude.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't really teach music anymore, but I do play music, and I've got a good friend, Mark Jackson, who has done like campaigns for movies and things like that. Creates the campaign for a movie. And I just asked him when I started this, I was like, hey, what's the best website where I can just put together a logo myself? And he goes, oh, I'll do it for you. So he's the one that created my logo, And
It's beautiful.
he made it. I didn't even ask him to do this, but he made the snake head in the shape of a guitar also. And some people notice it, and I think most people don't. But I think it's interesting. It's cool.
I love it. It's so well done. This is very, very cool. Well, what happens next? What's on the agenda coming up?
So on the agenda coming up, I have a festival that I'm performing at that has nothing to do with snakes in a couple weeks. But then I go and do a fan meet and greet event in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then I'm doing Animal Con, which is like Comic-Con, but it's for people who want to meet animal content creators. So I'm going.
Do you need an assistant? Can I go?
Yeah, you can come. It's in Orlando, Florida. You want to come to Orlando?
I don't like humidity, but yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun. That's a 4-day event. I'm doing these back to back. I'm doing Salt Lake City and then Animal Con. Yeah. So end of September is Salt Lake City. The first weekend of October is Animal Con. And then I'm supposed to be in Chicago for a reptile show, but I don't think I'm going to that. So I think it's just those things. And then I'm planning another trip to Suriname just for some of my Patreon supporters. I've got a small handful of Patreon supporters that want to come with me to Suriname to do that trip. And so we're kind of in the beginning stages of planning that for 2025.
I love it. How many vaccines did you have to get to go over there? I bet there was a lot.
I think I got 6. I remember right. Yeah. And they're not cheap. Like one of them was like $500 to get the jab. Yeah. And I'm planning a trip to Malaysia, and I'm going to have to get more vaccines for Malaysia. They just, there's different vaccines for every place you go. And
for sure. So exciting. All right. Where can people find you besides your YouTube channel?
I mean, the YouTube channel, the Green Room Python's on Instagram, TikTok. YouTube. YouTube is the main content, but I've got short stuff on the others.
Yeah. I love it. You're the best. Love you so much.
You're the best.
So excited. You're doing so much fun things.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I really dig it. Thank you for listening, everybody. And if you have any questions about snakes, you got to reach out to Bob. He's the best.
Thanks for having me, Susan. This is fun.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, honey. I'll see you.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And definitely hit that subscribe button. Super helpful. Thanks. Bye.